I'm pretty confident they were pretty good friends. They were not almost brothers. I am Tom McMillan, a historian with Gettysburg History, and we are standing today at the Winfield S. Hancock Wounding Monument on Cemetery Ridge. When I saw the movie Gettysburg, the story that stuck out most to me was the story of Lewis Armistead and Winfield Scott Hancock. How could that not tug at your heartstrings? Two friends, almost brothers, served together in the U.S. Army, served in combat, torn apart by the Civil War, went their different ways, and then faced each other on the fields of Pickett's Charge, where Armistead's men attacked Hancock's men and both fell wounded. What a story that was. Looking into it a bit for my book, Armistead and Hancock, though, I found it's a great story, but it was a little bit romanticized, maybe heavily romanticized in the novel and the movie. And that is not a criticism of those works. Michael Shara's incredible book, Killer Angels, is the thing that got me reinterested as an adult in studying the Civil War. Just brilliant work. And Shara never said he was writing a scholarly history of the Battle of Gettysburg. He was writing a novel. The word novel is even in the subhead. Killer Angels, a novel of the Civil War. He won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction. The movie makers of the movie Gettysburg never said they were doing a Ken Burns documentary. They were making a Hollywood-style movie based on a novel. But through the years, those stories have taken hold as absolute truth. So what is the real story of Armistead and Hancock? Some people have criticized it over the years, questioning the relationship. How deep was the relationship? Were they friends at all? Well, I wrote a book with a subtitle calling them friends, so obviously I think they were friends. I'm pretty confident they were pretty good friends. They were not almost brothers. They weren't even best friends in the modern sense in that they spent so much time away from each other. But they served together on the frontier. They served together in combat. They built that bond as soldiers, and that bond lasted 19 years until they met in the fields of Pickett's Charge. Did they go to West Point together? No, they did not. Armistead was the older man by 7 years. Armistead was through his escapades at West Point, serving in the Second Seminole War down in Florida before Winnie Hancock even enrolled. They would meet in 1944 on the frontier in the Indian Territory of what is now Oklahoma. And they would serve together there at two different forts for 16 months. One of their sites, there were only 6 officers there. They lived in the same officer's hut. Their names appear on the same letter. Of course they were friends. They lived together. They knew each other. That's where the bond was formed. Shortly after that, both become part of the Mexican War. They serve in the same unit, the 6th Infantry. They fought in some of the same battles, and they served together in the same company in the post-war occupation of Mexico. Henry Heath, another Confederate general, future Confederate general, who was with them, said it was the happiest mess in the Army at that point, that they were all good friends and associates. But after that, they get different assignments. In the 13 years between 1848 in 1861, Armistead and Hancock were almost never together. Even when they were at the same post, Armistead was on detached service. There was one period for several months in the 1850s when the entire 6th Infantry made a legendary 1,000-mile march to the West Coast. They would have been together there, catching up. But when they got there, they were split up again. Armistead was sent to the Indian Territory of Arizona, and Hancock became a quartermaster in Los Angeles. They communicated through orders, but there were no letters between them, and they didn't see each other for a long time. Now, the movie and the novel talk about the famous farewell gathering at the Hancock home in California. There have been questions about that. It was based on a story told by Hancock's wife, Almira Hancock. Was it true? Some people think it wasn't true at all. Some people think she made some of it up. I don't know it was exactly the way she wrote it, but there is definitely evidence that they got together. There was some sort of gathering at the Hancock home. Mrs. Hancock writes that several soldiers were there, some of them going north, some of them going south, but she only identified 3 of them. Hancock and Armistead, obviously, and Albert Sidney Johnson. More were there. Richard Garnett was probably there, but we don't know. Those were the only 3 that she identified. And she talks about that teary-eyed clutch with Armistead and Hancock, where in the movie it is said, Armistead exclaimed, "When, if I ever raise my hand against you, may God strike me dead." May God strike me dead. That's how close these guys were. Except that's not the way Almira Hancock wrote it. she said that he said, "May God strike me dead if I'm ever forced to leave the soil of my native state, should worse come to worse." So it almost looks as though, by her telling it, she was there. Armistead was saying he was signing up to fight a defensive war. His attitude would change, obviously, but that's what I think is the true story of that gathering. So what happened wasn't quite the movie and novel version, and that is also when Armistead gave Elmira Hancock his prayer book. He did not give it to Longstreet in a tent on the eve of the Battle of Gettysburg, but that made such a great story in the novel and the movie. And the novel and the movie brought so many people into the Civil War story. And this story does kind of reflect the friendship between members of both of these armies, unique to the American Civil War. They knew each other. Many of the officers did go to West Point together and served with one another. They knew men in the other ranks, not just Armistead and Hancock, but Armistead and Hancock represented that friendship. We are now in the angle, obviously, where on July 3rd, 1863, troops under Armistead and Hancock clashed in battle. These two men had been in the Civil War for the full 2 years before this. They had been at some of the same battlefields, some of the same battles, but they had never met in combat until July 3rd, 1863. Winfield Scott Hancock obviously was very involved in the first 2 days of the battle here. Lewis Armistead was not. July 3rd was going to be his big day. Did they know they were fighting against one another? Probably. From intelligence reports and prisoners, they would have known that. But there is no indication they were talking about that, writing about that, longing for one another. Oh, Winnie boy, oh, lo. That's all movie and novel stuff. These guys were here just to do their job. As Civil War buffs know, Armistead led a brigade in Pickett's charge, leading his men across the field, said to have put his black hat on the edge of his sword, "Who will follow me?" and led 100 to 150 men over the wall. That pretty much was the Confederate breakthrough. There weren't many more than that. Hancock's troops shot him. He was wounded twice. There is the Armistead wounding marker. Always controversy over whether it was accurately placed. Many people think it is inaccurately placed. What I can tell you, looking at the records in the first-person accounts, is whatever your feeling is, you can find a first-person account to agree with it. There's some that said he was killed as soon as he crossed the wall. One man said he was hit when he crossed the wall and staggered forward to the second line of guns, and many reports say he made it to the second line of guns. That is where Henry Bingham agreed that the monument should be. So for better or for worse, somewhere he made it up into this angle, and that's where the Lewis Armistead marker is. At the same time, Winfield Scott Hancock also was wounded, about maybe 200 yards to the south here, right along the same line as Cemetery Ridge. These two guys going down, two friends going down at the same time. Shortly after Armistead falls, he is approached by Union Captain Henry Bingham, who happens to be a staff officer on Hancock's staff. Now, Armistead's a Mason, Bingham's a Mason, Hancock's a Mason. It is because of this meeting that we have the fabulous friend-to-friend Masonic memorial in the cemetery annex. But it's interesting to read Bingham's account. He doesn't mention anything about a Masonic reason for this meeting happening. Sometimes legends build up over the years. If you read Bingham's account, he's told there's a wounded Confederate officer here. He's told it's James Longstreet. He thinks he's coming to help Longstreet. It's only when he gets to Armistead and they identify themselves, he realizes who it is. Armistead hears the name Hancock, said it's at Winfield Scott Hancock, says he's an old and valued friend, and offers that he, as Bingham would write later, he regrets or repents what happened this day. Now, years later, people in the North seized on this as a sign that Armistead was reneging on his commitment to the Confederacy. I do not believe that at all. He was a proud Confederate soldier. I think he was probably upset that he was fighting against his friend Hancock. We will never know for sure.